Thank you for your messages on the badger cull. Earlier on today, Roger in Mark, who is a farmer there, says that this is the most positive thing that has come out of DEFRA in my lifetime, Claire. The TB test is so draconian. I know, as I am a farmer of cattle myself, this change in policy is the best sign we might eradicate TB. It's a really positive step. It's not just badgers which carry it. We can't just keep culling them. And to Steve in Suffolk, who is listening in, says that they say they don't vaccinate cows for TB as they then show positive in a TB test. This means any cow that has natural immunity due to exposure to TB will also show positive and be culled. So how many of the cattle being destroyed actually have TB and how many may actually be immune? Surely the test is flawed. Well, I mean, we can look into this, and I know that questions about this have been raised before. Well, the government's announced a big shift in how it's planning to tackle tuberculosis in cattle, and that could mean badger culls will be phased out in Somerset over the next few years. Instead, ministers say their priority will be developing a vaccine for the disease in cattle. Badger culling has been controversial ever since. How many times have we debated it on this show? On many others. It started in Somerset back in 2013. So why the change in approach now? DEFRA's chief scientific advisor is Gideon Henderson.
I think what we've got to recognise in this debate is that just how debilitating bovine tuberculosis is. It kills more than 30,000 cows a year, or causes them to be slaughtered, costs the government more than £100 million per year, therefore the taxpayer, and costs farmers a significant amount, as well as causing them very significant anguish. So in that setting, what we have to do is apply all of the different approaches that we can to try and reduce the incidence of bovine tuberculosis in our cattle. Culling, which has been the government response for some years now, has been proven to be effective and is reducing the number of incidents of bovine tuberculosis. But it's not the only thing that we have in our weaponry. And of course, no one wants to carry on killing badgers forever. They're a protected species. So the idea is that as the culling has reduced the numbers in the high-risk areas, we're able to move in some of those areas over the next few years towards a position of either vaccinating the badgers or increasing biosecurity on farms to support what has already been achieved by the culling so far.
Gideon Henderson, Chief Scientific Advisor to DEFRA. Vanessa Mason is from the Somerset Badger Group, which opposes the cull. Good morning to you, Vanessa.
Good morning, Claire.
I'm guessing you are very happy with this.
Yes, I mean, obviously it's a very positive step in the right direction, and I've been spending a little bit of time wading through some of the detail of DEFRA's next steps strategy document. There's a lot of encouraging things in there, particularly accelerating the work to develop a deployable cattle vaccine, which I think all sides would agree is a really major step forward. Obviously, improving diagnostics in terms of cattle testing, etc., and also moving towards non-lethal control, so badger vaccination and cattle vaccination, rather than killing thousands of badgers and thousands of cattle. So there's a lot of really positive things in there. Sadly, what it doesn't mean, and reading through some of the detail, is that the intensive 4-year badger culling will continue in the high-risk areas. And the west of Somerset, or sort of the southwest of England and the Midlands, is the high-risk area. And I think their plans are by 2021 they've already culled in 57% of that area, to have culled another 20%. So we're talking about 75% of the southwest in a 4-year, or having gone through or going through or rolling out an intensive badger cull.
Is it not right, though, that the government continues? You know, when we're talking about 30,000 cows a year, we're talking about a cost of £100 million a year, to the extent, you know, how many are infected with bovine TB. Isn't it right the government does continue to use all the possible weapons to fight this, which would include culling?
Well, we've always argued and we've always offered badger vaccination as an alternative. And it's great that the government now recognise that badger vaccination is a much more important, if you like, tool in their toolbox to use. There are, and one of the things that it does say in this report as one of its sort of immediate steps is that they will support vaccination of badgers in those parts of the high-risk and edge areas where there is a reservoir of infection in badgers, and I would question how they decide that. But farmers that decide not to cull or have been unable to organise sufficiently to do so, they will support badger vaccination programme. Now that's a major step forward.
Okay, I'm going to have to end it there, Vanessa, because I do want to speak to a farmer. James Small is a livestock farmer based on the Mendip Hills, former chair of the National Farmers Union in Somerset. Good morning to you, James.
Good morning, Claire.
I know you have been a supporter of culling in Somerset. What are your concerns after this news?
Well, I think this is just to follow it on from the original TB strategy. It's always looked, as I've just been listening to you talking now, that there's going to take many tools to tackle this disease. And that's what we need to focus on. It's tackling the disease. I have some concerns where we talk about the use of the wildlife controls and vaccination as equivalents to each other. They're not. Vaccination has a role to play in certain circumstances. Wildlife controls have a part to play in other circumstances. And what we know is no one thing is going to tackle the disease. So it's a range of measures that's needed to be able to get on top of it and work towards becoming TB-free in both domesticated stock and in the wildlife.
Is that right? Despite the fact that the government says there's been a breakthrough in the test that does go alongside a vaccine for cattle?
Well, absolutely. The problem is there is no new vaccine. So all the talk about the development of a vaccine, it's still the same vaccine. It's the BCG. With the cattle side of it, there are two things. Number one, it was illegal to vaccinate cattle with that because there wasn't what's called a DIVA test, a differentiation between infected and vaccinated animal. Now, that's what they're working on. And if that is possible to be developed and to be able to be deployed, then that gives us another tool in the armory to be able to tackle this disease.
There's no firm date yet for when culls would be phased out. Do you think they should carry on until there's evidence that the vaccine is actually up and running and working?
Well, I'm a strong believer that you shouldn't not do something in the hope of what might come along tomorrow. If we've got things that work well today, that is reducing the incidence of TB, that is leading to an environment where we will be able to deploy other tools, then we should be doing that now. So I won't want to see any arbitrary time frames put onto it. We should use what we've got now. We are seeing very good successes with regards to the decrease of incidence of TB. We are sadly still having to kill too many cattle, but that's because the testing is getting better. It's becoming more efficient. We're finding it. We're rooting it out better. So all of these things working in conjunction is working towards the ultimate goal, which I think we all want, which is to get rid of TB.
James, thank you for your time today. James Small, livestock farmer based on the Mendip Hills. Before that, you heard from Vanessa Mason from the Somerset Badger